event. And so for that reason, we asked John Henes to come and join us today. And I have to say, I will let John tell his own story, but I'll just say a couple things. One is that John is a graduate of Cardozo, class of '96. He is a partner in the restructuring group at Kirkland & Ellis. He's one of our nation's leading restructuring lawyers. He's very prominent in the media and talking about some of the really high-profile bankruptcy and restructuring proceedings that are constantly going on. And he is a tremendous friend of our school. And so John is chair of the advisory committee of the Henes Center on Corporate Governance, and some of you have met him in that capacity. He's a member of the Cardozo Board of Overseers, and he was in 2012 named Alum of the Year, and that was a really special event for all of us. That's the broad outline, I have to say, just in the broadest of terms, and I'm going to leave the rest to you, John. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Dean Diller. Appreciate it, thank you. And thank you for that welcoming thing. I think a lot of it was exaggerated, but I appreciate it. I want to thank Pat Weiss, because Pat organized all of this and worked incredibly hard and is, for some reason, likes to promote me, and that's very nice of her. And then Val is here, and I don't know how many of you know Val, but I actually think, no offense, but I think she runs this whole place, at least the way that I see it, and does an amazing job. So let me just give a brief introduction to this talk. Dean Diller mentioned that I was one of the two alum of the year in 2012. Randy Weingarten was also an alum of the year. She's in charge of she runs the entire United Teachers Federation, the union for teachers. And before the event for Alum of the Year, I sat down with Dean Diller and Pat Weiss for lunch. And somewhere during lunch, one of them asked a question, and I don't remember which one, and they said, so John, you tell us about yourself a little bit, right? I mean, we know a little bit about you, but tell us about how you got to where you are, because clearly, you must have always been very focused and ambitious and knew what you wanted and did well in school. And I stopped and said, well, actually, none of that is true. I was, for a very long time, unfocused and unambitious and really did nothing, didn't study, didn't think that I was smart in any way, and then told my story to them. And when I finished, they said, we'd really think that you should go and tell this story to other people because we think it could be helpful. And I don't know if it is helpful, but hopefully something that I say will resonate with you and be helpful in your lives. There we go. Okay, so this is basically my bio, okay? And so what you can see, and Dean Diller mentioned this, I'm a senior partner at Kirkland & Ellis. I do restructurings. I've worked on some of the most complex restructurings that have occurred. I was a Cardozo grad of 1996. I was awarded Alum of the Year. I've been on CNBC and Bloomberg. I've lectured at different schools. I've taught here. I'm involved with a lot of charities. I'm on a lot of boards. And why am I telling you this? I'm not telling you this because I want you to be impressed in any way, because I really don't. The reason I'm telling you this is that if you handed this piece of paper out to my parents and my friends and my teachers from, let's just call it high school, and said, okay, in the graduating class that John Henes graduated in, list your top 5 people who would have done this. I would not have been on that list. It's not even close to on that. My parents wouldn't even have put me on that list. I mean, there's no one that would put me on this list. And so what I want to do today is kind of talk to you about some of the things that occurred in my life, some of the lessons that I've learned, and again, I hope that these are helpful to all of you. Okay, so let me start with an anecdote. I was after my second year of law school here at Cardozo, I was a summer associate at Weil, Gotshal & Manges, and I don't know if any of you have been a summer associate, but it is a great job because they pay you a lot of money. You get paid basically the same salary as what the associates get paid, at least on a weekly basis. But what they really want to do is they want to hire you. It's very hard not to get an offer once you're a summer associate. So they take you out to great restaurants. They have all these events. They do all of these amazing things. And it's really a great summer. And after one of the events, I was sitting with one of my best friends from the summer class, and we were having a drink. And he stopped and looked at me and said, I'm kind of depressed right now. I said, well, why is that? Like, here we are in the middle of the summer, we're making all this money, we're having fun, we're doing this stuff. And he said, because I'm looking at you, and I just got depressed, which, by the way, is not a nice thing to hear. You kind of feel bad about that. And I said, why? And he said, here's why. He said, when I was in high school, all I did was study, right? I studied all the time. He said, and you played sports. He said, and when I studied, I got great grades. I basically got all A's, okay? And you had an 84.25 average. You couldn't even get a B average in high school. And he goes, and then I took the SATs, and I got a 1600, right? And you got an 1130. He goes, I went to Harvard, and you went to Union, and you only went to Union because you played football. Otherwise, who knows where you would have gone, if anywhere. He said, then I got to Harvard, and he goes, and I worked really hard again. And he goes, and you played beer pong. He goes, and then I got straight A's, and you got a 2.98. Again, you could not even get a B, okay? Then we take the LSATs, and he said, I did great. I got almost a perfect score. He goes, you got a 159. He said, I ended up going to Yale Law School. You went to Cardozo. And he goes, and now here we are both sitting at the same place at Weill, Gotcho, and Manges. He goes, that's depressing, okay? Now, I had a different take on it. I didn't think it was so depressing. I just said to him, actually, it's all about when you peak. Okay? And that's what some of this talk is about. It's about when you peak. You're going to peak at different times. But I think the most important thing is it's not just about when you peak, it's you want to keep peaking. You never want to stop growing. You always want to continue to grow. Okay, so one lesson, right? You're not carved in stone. So just some brief examples. So when I was in high school, as I mentioned before, right, all I really did was I played sports, I hung out with my friends. That's what I did. And I was pretty good at sports. I played football, basketball, baseball, lacrosse. And that is 100% what defined me, right? That's what gave me my self-worth. It was sports, right? So when I had a good game, I was great. If I didn't have a good game, I felt kind of bad about myself. But I was good. And the town that I grew up in, it was a small town, and everybody came together for the games, right? That was a big part of almost the social life of the town. And so I would walk through the town the Friday before a football game, wearing our jerseys, and they'd say, come on, Henes, go out there and get them tomorrow, right? And it felt good. But that defined me, and we'll come back to why that's not a good thing. Second thing, right? So I played sports. I didn't care about studies at all, right? And this came through, and I proved to myself over and over again how I was not smart. So when I took the SATs, I got a 470 on my verbal SATs, okay? Now, let's put that in perspective. The average New York State verbal SATs the year I took it was a 501. The national average for verbal SATs was a 507. I got a 470. So I was well below the average person on the SATs, okay? Now, both my parents went to Cornell. They were both professionals. I grew up in a nice, small suburb of New York City. I went to a good school with good teachers. So why am I getting a 470 on my SATs, okay? Well, the only thing that I could come up with is I was illiterate, okay? And I wasn't smart. And that's what I believed. So I had sports, and I wasn't smart. Then jump ahead to college for a second. So, and you'll see, I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail, but I didn't do well in college either. But I did happen to win one academic award at graduation. It was for my senior thesis. I won the best work in Judaica, okay? Now, I think that there was probably only one work in Judaica, which was mine, so that's probably why I won the award. But my dad was proud, right? Because I had never won an academic award before. So when I got home, and I had no job when I graduated college, I just went to my parents' couch. He came downstairs and he said, I'm proud of you for this award. I'd like to read your senior thesis. I said, great. Gave him my senior thesis. He left. He went upstairs. 30 seconds later, he was downstairs. He threw it at me. It was a big, hard binder on it. It hurt. He actually didn't throw it at me. But he was angry, and he goes, I can't believe this. He goes, I actually paid for you to go to college, 4 years of college. And he goes, and you are illiterate. And I said, what are you talking about? I won an award. This is great. He goes, in the past? I said, what do you mean? He goes, you started off your senior thesis in the past. I said, well, what's wrong with that? He said, in the past, P-A-S-S-E-D? I said, yeah, what's wrong with that? He's like, really? You don't know the difference between P-A-S-S-E-D and P-A-S-T? And I was like, oh, I guess I do, but so what? Like, what does it matter? And he was like, I don't understand what's going on. But that's how I felt. Like, I wasn't smart. It didn't matter. He got the gist of it. Why is he so upset? Okay? But one of the things that you'll see, and I learned, is it's never too late to develop yourself. Because if I had stopped right here, and if I had always and still today believed all of this stuff, right, where would I be? I have no idea. Okay. So now, one of the things, though, that I realized that I was good at, And it's probably the one thing that allowed me to do okay through the years, even when I really did believe, and I'm not just saying this, believing that I wasn't smart and all I had was sports. I don't know if any of you have seen the movie Clueless or not. But in the movie Clueless, there's a great scene where Cher, who's the young high school girl, is talking to her dad, who's like this very tough corporate litigator lawyer. And she says, and it's up here, he says to her, so you mean to tell me that you argued your way from a C+ to an A-, right? She says, totally, based on my powers of persuasion. You proud? And he says, honey, I couldn't be happier than if they were based on real grades, okay? And so I have my own story to that. So my parents tried everything because they would say to me, you know, look, you are smart. We know you are. You have potential. You just don't work. You don't do anything, okay? And they tried to threaten me, you know, we're going to ground you. We're going to send you to military school. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. You can't play sports anymore. And they never actually went through with any of the threats. But then they tried to incentivize me because I kept bugging them for a car. I kept saying, come on, I should get a car. Like, I play football. I've got a girlfriend. I've got my friends. You got to give me a car. Like, that'll make everything perfect. And they're like, we're not going to give you a car. You don't do anything. You don't work, right? Like, honestly, like, we love you. You're nice. You're great. But you're not making us so proud in your academics. So they tried to incentivize me. And they said, okay, look, if you make honor roll, you can get a car. And to make honor roll at my school, you had to have an 85 average and nothing below an 80. And so I went through the semester, and the way that it worked is you sat in class at the end and they handed you your report card, which you had to bring home. And so I looked at it, and I had an 85.25 average, but I had a 79 in typing, okay? So I missed it by 1 point, right? So what did I do? I took my report card, I walked down to the typing teacher, and I said, you got to change my grade, okay? You can't give me a 79. I mean, it's 1 point, right? You're taking my car away from me. And she was like, oh, it's too bad. That's the grade that you got. I said, but what's the difference between a 79 and an 80? And she was like, 1 point, so you're not getting your car. I said, okay. I said, but look, I said, you know me. Like, I'm always polite, right? I'm always nice. I'm not a kid that goofs off in class. Like, I'm somebody that's always helpful. And she said, no, that's true. You are. You are nice. You're always polite, and I appreciate that. And I said, and look, like, I got fat fingers. I play football. I hurt my hand. Like, it's hard to type. It's hard to do all this stuff, right? And she said, I get it. I understand. And then I finally said something to her like, okay, look, like, one day, what if you're, like, stranded on the side of the road, okay? Aren't you going to be sitting there and thinking, if I had just given John that 80, he might be in a car right now that passes by and he'll be able to help me and get me there. And she kind of laughed. And we ended up, literally, and I'm not kidding, she ended up walking down and changing my grade from a 79 to an 80, and I got my car. Now, I shouldn't have gotten the car. As a parent now of 5 children, like, I hope I would never do that for one of my children because it's not a real good lesson. But it is a lesson that, you know, you're not carved in stone. You can change the grade. Like, go and ask, right? Try to go do things. And by the way, and if you are polite and nice and people like you, that gets you further than anything else, okay? So one other lesson, then I say this because my wife and I were out to dinner with another couple. When a waiter comes to the table and starts telling you the specials, you should stop talking and listen to them because they're people too. I saw that. It was a very weird thing. Anyway, okay. So there's now here, so here I am, and I'm going to college, and I'm defined by sports. I only got into college because of sports, and that is true. And I think about this quote, and it's a quote from The Great Gatsby, which I actually don't think it means what I'm going to tell you I believe it means. But conduct might be founded on the hard rock or the wet marshes. And I think what I take that to mean is that conduct, right, the way that you're going to act, sometimes it's based on a real solid foundation where you're feeling great about yourself and you're doing great things. But other times, and probably more importantly, it's when you're on that wet marsh, when you're stuck in the mud, when you don't know what to do and you really got to figure it out. That's when things really come to you and you really figure out what your conduct in life is going to be like. So here I am in college, and I go off to play football. But there was a problem. And the problem was that my senior year of football in high school, the first game I hurt my elbow, okay? But I didn't tell anybody. And I didn't tell anybody because I didn't want to stop playing. So I just kind of played through the pain. And then I got to basketball, and I didn't want to tell anybody because then I wouldn't have been able to play basketball. So I played basketball without telling anybody. Then I got to baseball, same thing. When I got finished with baseball and we had the summer, I said, okay, it's probably a good time to go get my arm checked out, which I couldn't straighten all the way. So I went to a bunch of doctors, They had a whole bunch of different things that they thought maybe it was. And at the end of the day, what they said was, look, you got to rest it. You got to get better, okay? And so I ended up not being able to play football my freshman year in college. I just worked out with the team. And that was kind of okay. I kind of still felt like I was part of the team that being defined by sports, I was still kind of okay with it. Then sophomore year, I go, and the first or second day of double sessions, the football coach said, all right, everybody take a step back. I took a step back. My foot got caught in the turf. My knee turned. I had all this pain. I had to go through a little bit of rehab. I finally got back on the field, played a couple games, and then in practice I got hit. My knee hurt again, had an MRI, and they said that I had cartilage that came a little bit dislodged from my knee. And so basically what the doctor said was, listen, if you can continue to play, but you're going to get hit at some point. I don't know if it's tomorrow or next week. And when you do, the cartilage is going to fall into your knee is going to lock. It's going to be painful. We're going to have to go in and rip it out. Or you might be able to live with it for the rest of your life. And for some reason, and I regret this now, but I made the decision that I was going to stop playing football. Okay? And by the way, 10 years later, I stood up out of a chair and it did dislodge into my knee and it was really painful. But then they had arthroscopic surgery so they could take it out and it wasn't so bad. But anyway, so sports ended for me. And with that, it also kind of who I was ended with me. I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know what to do, right? I literally was like, I have no sports. What do I do now? So I just started trying like random things. And so I had a radio show with a bunch of my friends really early in the morning. It was a rap show, and I don't know if you guys know like Tribe Called Quest and Public Enemy and rap groups like that, but we put them on, and here we were doing that. And then one night I was drunk at a fraternity party, and my buddy who was in the band, he played the drums, they were taking a break, and I went up to him and I said, hey, do you guys play Johnny Be Good? You know that song? It's like Chuck Berry song. He said, yeah. I said, hey, I can sing that song. Let me sing it. And I got up, I sang it. I woke up the next morning, hungover. He came in, he said, you know, we hate our lead singer, but you were pretty good. Can you do it? And by the way, I'm not a good singer, so I don't know why he said that. But I kind of did that with them for like 6 months. The problem was I couldn't do it without getting drunk because I wasn't secure enough. And at night, at fraternity parties, it didn't really matter, but like when you had a battle of the bands at 10 a.m. and you're at the bar at 8 a.m., you know, drinking when you woke up at 6 a.m. from drinking, it's not so good. And then I tried to play, right? In high school, a bunch of my friends did like some of the plays in our town, but I never did it. I think some of it was like, I was a little bit insecure about doing it, so I tried it. I didn't really like it, but I tried it. So all of these things were just things that I tried, and there were certain things about them I liked, and certain I didn't, but I started to kind of find myself a little bit, not completely, but a little bit. And then in college, like I said, again, I didn't do well. I didn't study, I didn't work. I got a 2.98, right? So just under a B average. Again, parents weren't so proud. Now it's senior year, okay? Everybody is looking for a job, right? Because that's what you do, right? You go to college, and when you leave college, you're supposed to either get a job or you go to graduate school. And while my friends were applying to be investment bankers or do PR or whatever they were going to do or go to law school, I literally, and I'm not kidding, was walking the halls looking for people to play beer pong with, okay? Didn't even think about looking for a job. And why didn't I think about it? Because I didn't know what I wanted to do, right? Which, by the way, is not a good answer for not looking for a job. So I end up graduating, as I said before, going home, lying on my parents' couch, okay? And at some point, my dad came to me and he was like, look, you got to do something, right? I mean, like, don't you want to like go to a movie with your friends at some point or have some money to spend? And I said, yeah, you know, you're right. So what I did is I went to the local mall and applied for a job as a stock boy at the Gap, okay? Now, luckily, when you have 4 years of, you know, you went to college at Union College for 4 years and you have a degree in history, you're probably pretty qualified to be a stock boy at the Gap. I got the job. I hated the job, right? I hated the job because I was stuck in a back room and I was folding clothes, which I'm not good at. I'm still not good at. I don't ever want to really be good at it. I find no reason to be good at it. And I did that for a little while, but at least I made a little bit of money. I was doing something, wasn't lying on my parents' couch. And then one day I came home and my mom said, I was talking to a friend of mine and her son just got together with this Israeli guy and this rich Jewish guy, and they're starting a talk show on a private cable station, and the talk show is called Schmoozing, and they're looking for segment producers. Would you want to do that? I didn't know what that meant, but I met with the guy, and what it meant was they were doing this talk show. They had 4 segments for each show, and what a segment was, you had to go find some topic, somebody to talk about the topic, research the topic, get the hosts of the show to understand it. So I did that for a while. Now, as you could imagine, schmoozing, private television station in Manhattan, probably not going to make it, okay? But it was good. I was making $200 a week. I was doing something. I was learning. It wasn't doing well. They came in. There were 4 segment producers. They fired 3. They asked me if I would produce the whole show. It kind of felt good to do that. Didn't pay me any more money. It was still $200 a week. But now I was doing the whole show until it all fell apart and they couldn't do it anymore. So I'm sure you guys can all guess, what did I do after that? Went back to the couch, right? Because what was I going to do? So I laid on the couch. And this is when things started to turn around. I was on my couch, and my mother, who is my biggest fan, right? My mother, I can do no wrong, right? So she would never tell me I'm doing anything wrong. She finally came down and told me I was doing something wrong. She said, you know, you went to 4 years of college, okay? Now you've been out of school for 1.5 years. You're lying on our couch. I mean, what are you going to do with your life? You got to do something. I said, I get it, but Mom, I don't know what I want to do. What do I want to do? And she said, it doesn't matter. Just do something. Take a step. Take any step. Just move forward. Do something. Right? And I sat there and I thought about it. I said, you know what? She's right. I got to take a step, right? Like, what am I going to, I got to do something with my life. And then I thought about something that happened in college. I had a grandfather, kind of an estranged grandfather for a long time until late in his life. But he was a big Hollywood producer. Like, he started Lorimar Productions and produced Dallas and the Waltons and Falcon Crest. He produced Rain Man, did all this stuff. I didn't know him, but I met him one time at my bar mitzvah, and then he kind of, I don't know, changed his life. He did a lot of changing his life and running away from things. But when I was in college, the one time I sort of looked for a job was I sent him a letter. And I sent him a letter and I said, hey, you know what? After I graduate, I think I'm going to come out to Hollywood. I want to go and run a movie studio. Because, of course, what else would you want to do but run a movie studio when you have no experience in anything? And then I would call him every week. And every week, his assistant would get on the phone with me and say, I'm sorry, he's not available. And I just, every week, I called him. Finally, one day, he picked up. I was surprised. Hey, I said, how are you? I said, thank you for picking up. I said, I wrote you a letter. He said, I know, I got your letter. I said, okay. I said, I may come out to Hollywood. I really want to get some advice. He goes, you want some advice? I'll give you advice. You want to run a movie studio? Run a movie studio. Goodbye, and he hung up. Now, when that happened, I was like, what a jerk, right? I mean, like, come on. Like, I'm his grandson, even if he doesn't know me. All I wanted was some advice. But as I was lying on that couch and my mother was telling me to take a step, I thought about that. And I said, you know what? Actually, it was probably the best advice anybody ever gave me. Because if you wanted, all he was saying is, if you want to do something, do it, right? No one's stopping you. Just go do it. You want to run a movie studio? Run a movie studio. You want to go run an investment bank? Run an investment bank. You want to go start a charity? Start a charity. Just do it. And so I was lying there, and I was saying, okay, I got to take a step. And when I take that step, I can go do whatever I want to do. I just got to kind of figure it out. And then I got a call, and it was my grandmother, okay? And my grandmother said, I've been thinking a lot about you, John. And I know that you've never really done well in school, and I know you don't think you're smart, but you are. And she said, but I do know something about you, okay? You're a good negotiator. She's like, remember when you changed your grade, right, to get honor roll and get the car? Or remember how your parents never did send you to military school? Like, you're a good negotiator. You can figure it out. She's like, I think you should go to law school. And if you go to law school, you can get a degree, and then you'll always have a job because you can always hang out a shingle. I said, okay, kind of interesting, but maybe a little conspiracy between my mom and my grandma, right? It's all happening at once. But then my best friend calls, right? My best friend from college, and he had gone to law school. And he said to me, he was like, I was thinking about you today. I said, well, why is that? And he said, because I was in this class, and there was this big discussion about this debate over an issue. And I was thinking to myself, my good friend John Henes would love to be here right now. He would love to be having this debate. And he said, I think you should go to law school. So I sat there. I was like, okay, my mom wants me to take a step forward. I just got a call in the same day from my grandmother and my best friend, all telling me to go to law school. I'm going to go to law school. So I applied to law school. Now, one issue with law school was I had a 2.98 GPA and a 159 on my LSATs, which doesn't make it so easy to get into law school. But this is when also you just want to think about things. I know I don't have anything on the slide about it, but I started, as I was applying, I said, you know what? That really rich Jewish guy that started that TV station, who I actually got along with, I think one time he told me that he was either on the board of Cardozo or the board of Yeshiva or something. So I called him up and I said, will you be one of my recommendations? And he said, I'll do more than that. I'll be a recommendation, but I'll call the school for you too. And I got in. Now, did I get in because of him? Probably. But I did. But I think it's fine, okay? Because I think that people opening doors for you is fine. I think that if somebody opens it, you should thank them. And then you should work really hard to make them proud, okay? And so I went to law school. And in law school, for me, that is where my transformation of my life kind of took place, okay? So first thing is, I met my wife, who happens to be sitting here, who's a Cardozo grad also, and when I met her and liked her and chased her, one of the things I told her, right, because as I'm telling you now, I told her how I wasn't smart, I wasn't going to do well, but that was okay, right, because life works out, okay, and it doesn't really matter what job you get, which, by the way, I do believe. I don't know where you guys are in law school and if you're looking for jobs or not looking for jobs, but I want to tell you it's all going to work out no matter what, right? You just got to keep focused and just, have a good attitude and continue to try to grow, and it will all work out well. But my wife, Pam, said to me, one, you're smart, and second, if you work hard, you can do well, and third, why wouldn't you try to do well? Because if you do well, it is easier, okay? So I studied really, really hard because she pushed me and told me to study hard. Second thing that I did was I met Dean Macchiarola, who was the dean of the law school at that time. And where I write under here, there will only be a few. And what I mean by that is there's only going to be a few people in your life, less than a handful of people, who actually proactively think of you during their day. They proactively say, how can I help you? And Dean Macchiarola would do that with me. He would sit there and say, how can I help John? I don't know why he did that, but he would. And he would come to me with ideas and things that I should focus on. And it's something that I'll never forget. And unfortunately, he died a couple of years ago. But this is an amazing man. And it's something that what he taught me was to give that back. And I try to do that with people as well. I try to go and say, I find somebody that for whatever reason strikes a chord with me and say, how can I help this person? How can I open a door for this person? And hopefully I'll open a door for them, they'll go do great things, and then they'll open a door for somebody else. And if you do that, it's just going to make the world a better place. Third is, they were great professors. The professors at this school are amazing, and they teach you. And they teach you it's more than just learning. It's more than just learning theory. They actually teach you how to think. And in a second, I'll talk about that because they prepare you. They do prepare you for the real world. They prepare you to get out there. I know that there's a lot of people that talk about, well, you're in school and it's not the real world, right? And school is not the real world. But you're learning how to actually go out and compete and do well in the real world. And then the last thing is, and for anybody that knows me, I can't have a talk without a Bruce Springsteen lyric because anything you ever need to know in life, you just need to listen to Bruce Springsteen, and he has written about it and he will teach you. And he has, in Badlands, great song, one of his best songs, he says, working in the field till you get your back burned, working beneath the wheels till you get your facts learned. And what it means is, right, you're going to work in the field. Your back is going to burn. It's going to burn because the sun's beating down on it. It's going to burn because you're working hard and the muscles hurt. But that hard work is going to pay off. And then when you're sitting there and you're underneath the wheels and you've got your sleeves rolled up and you're getting dirty because you're learning everything, you're going to take those things, that hard work and all that learning, and you're going to use it to get ahead and to succeed in life. All right. So now I said, I was defined by sports, and that's not a good thing. But I think you can be defined by things. I just think it's not like, you don't want to be defined as an actor or a student or a professor, right? But be defined by your grit. Be defined by your hard work. And so for me, there's another little story. But before I do that, and I just looked up here, there's a book, and you should all, right, go out and get this book. It's called Mindset. It's by Carol Dweck. Carol Dweck is a professor at Stanford. It really is like a life-changing book, the way that she thinks of things. And what it basically says is that there's two types of mindsets that people have, a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. And people with a fixed mindset believe that when they were born with a certain intelligence, they were born with a certain aptitude, and that's what they can do, okay? And then they focus on that, and if they fail, their life's over, right? It's terrible, that's it, I failed. A person with a growth mindset says, I wasn't born with a certain level of intelligence, I can get smarter. Okay? I wasn't born with just some aptitude. I can do anything. And when I fail, I didn't fail, I learned. Okay? And that's the difference. And I didn't do that so well, but the book it's an amazing book. But let me talk about that for me. So, first year of law school, like I said, I worked so hard. I sacrificed. I gave up everything. I only focused on law school. My only friends at that point were friends in law school. And we had one midterm, and it was in civil procedure. And I knew everything in that class, everything. And the reason I know everything is because my wife got mono, okay? Obviously kissing somebody other than me, but I'm kidding, I think. But anyway, she had mono, and so she didn't get to study. So the night before the exam, I sat down with her and I taught her the entire class, right? Everything. And we ended up going into the exam. We sat down, we took it, we walked out. I walked into the hall, saw her. I said, how great was that? That was the easiest test ever. You were right. If you study hard, you do well. That was amazing. She said, what are you talking about? That was hard. That was really hard. So, okay, I thought that was easy. You didn't really get to study. I get it. Like, maybe I'm not a great teacher. And we left for a break. And when we got back, we sat in a room like this. And at that time, I don't know if you guys still do this, but you took exams in blue books. So you wrote them all out in those little blue books. And the professor, John Beckerman, handed the test back. And I opened mine up. Was all excited to probably see my first A ever. And there was a red line through everything I had written. And on every page, it said irrelevant. And it was a big C-. And I was shocked. I was upset. I couldn't believe it. And I looked over at Pam, and she had a weird look on her face. And I was like, oh, she must have done badly also. We leave. We get into the hallway again. She's like, so how'd you do? I was like, I got a C-. I can't believe it. Like, this hard work doesn't pay off. Like, I am not smart. Like, clearly, this is not good. I said, why? How'd you do? She goes, oh, it doesn't matter. I said, yeah, how'd you do? I said, you don't have to be embarrassed. She's like, oh, I got an A. I was like, oh, that's great. So then I went to John Beckerman, and I said, I don't understand this. I said, I knew everything. I studied so hard. And he said, I know. I could tell you studied hard, and I know that you knew everything. And you know how I know that? I said, no, how? He goes, because you wrote out the entire class from start to finish, right? It was great. It was like the textbook. I could use it next year. It's great. He said, but what you didn't do is you didn't answer the question. Okay? I asked you questions. You didn't answer them. You just wrote everything you knew, right? And at that moment, excuse me, at that moment something clicked. And I said, okay, I get it now, right? All this time, I thought it was just about, you just had to know everything. I never focused on that you actually have to answer a question, okay? And then I worked really, really hard, incredibly hard at focusing on how do I take a test, right? I've got to learn everything. I've got to study hard, but how do I take a test? And it ended up for me paying off because I ended up being in the top 10% of the class. I ended up getting A's for the first time, ended up making law review. But it was all, but I had to go through all this, and I could have very easily given up. I could have very easily said, I was right a long time ago, right? I only had sports, and now I don't have that anymore, and I'm not smart. I'm illiterate. I got that 470 on that verbal SATs, and that's who I am. But somewhere along the line, the people that I met along the way, I realized that that wasn't true. You can grow, and you can learn, and you can do well. Okay, so then I made law review, and just another kind of story, and this will lead into something. So in law review, right, and when you're on any of these law journals, you write a note. So I wanted to publish my note because now, as a student, right, I was good, I was smart, I could do all this stuff. And I worked really hard on my note. It was a terrible topic, but I worked really hard on the note. And we had to hand them in, and then you had to meet with an editor. And so for some reason, I got called in by the editor-in-chief, who was this guy, Steve Washington. And I didn't know why I was going to meet with him because he wasn't my editor. And he sat me down, he said, hey, John, listen. He's like, you're a good guy and everything, and pretty smart guy. He's like, but you got to take this stuff seriously. So what do you mean? He said, you can't write your note the night before and hand it in. That's just not appropriate. You got to work at this thing. And I'm thinking to myself, I spent a month on this. What are you talking about? And he goes, the grammar's terrible, right? You have words that don't make sense. Your sentences are run-on sentences. This is it's kind of an embarrassment. I walked out. I didn't say anything. I wanted him to think I'd worked on it the night before. I didn't want him to know I had worked on it for a month. And I walked out and I said, wow, okay, I need to learn. Somehow I'm going to have to learn how to write. Okay? Well, I didn't learn how to write in law school, truthfully. Okay? I ended up publishing my note, but that was all because of my editor who rewrote everything for me. But I did become managing editor of the Law Review, right, which is another lesson. And that was because while I couldn't write, I could lead a little bit. People liked me. People wanted to follow me, right? I had I don't know, and so they trusted me enough to be in a position on the Law Review where I actually, had oversight powers, which probably didn't make sense since I couldn't write, but that's okay. The last thing I want to say is this. The last thing on this slide is you can get really good at things, okay? But it takes practice. And one piece of advice I would give is if anybody tells you how to practice, don't listen to them, okay? Because everybody practices in their own way, okay? So for instance, and Melissa Casso, I should have thanked also. Melissa is a Cardozo grad. She's one of our superstar associates at Kirkland. She just moved to San Francisco, which is unfortunate for our New York office, but came back to see everybody and make sure she remains acclimated, but also agreed to kind of help me. So she knows how I practice, because she unfortunately had to listen to this. But the way that I practice is I talk to myself, okay? I talk things out. I don't write things down and memorize them and try to do that. Like, I talk. And like, so if you see me walking down the street with my earpiece in talking, maybe I'm on the phone with a client, or maybe I'm practicing my speech, okay? But that's what I do. And that's how I remember things, and that's how it works for me. But everybody's got their own way. And so when I went into interviews for jobs, what I did was I sat there and thought about, what are the questions they're going to ask me? And then I would talk them out. I'd stand in my kitchen, I'd walk down the street, whatever, until I could answer the questions without even thinking. And it made it so easy, because I would go into these interviews and they'd ask me these questions, and I would be thinking about what I'm going to have for lunch while I'm spouting off some answer. And it worked. So the two things I would say is practice matters, right? Practice, 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 and find your own way to practice that works for you. Okay, so be yourself. So now I do well. I get on the law review. I go off and I get a summer associate position at Weil Gotshal. And I walked into Weil Gotshal so intimidated. And I walked in intimidated because in my class it was people from Columbia, NYU, Harvard, Yale, Stanford, right, Penn, all of these places, right? People that all their lives had done well. Always, right? They'd always done well. That's how they got to these places. And there's me. I had done well for 2 months, maybe a month, right? And I walked in and I was intimidated. And what I said to myself was, I don't know if I can actually compete with these people. I still can't write, which you got to write as a lawyer, right? And am I really smart, or did I just get lucky? And so I was intimidated by it. But I thought to myself, you know what? I can be smart. So one thing I said was, and I think this is a really good lesson, especially now being a partner and seeing people come in, I said, the first assignment I get, I am going to do the best job. I'm going to work so hard on it. And even if I hand it in and the partner says it wasn't great, I'm going to take it back and I'm going to work on it until it is great. So they sit there and say, this guy cares, okay? Because I figured if that first assignment I did really well and I showed I was enthusiastic and I was going to do well, they all talk, right? They have to talk. So now the partner's going to say, oh, this Henes kid, he really wants to work. He's really great. And after that, I'd get the benefit of the doubt. So if I didn't do well on something, they'd be like, oh, it must have been a bad night. We took him out to a party. He got drunk. He was hungover. That was the reason. Not, he can't do it, right? So I think it's a really good lesson. That first thing you ever do for somebody, not that you shouldn't do the second thing great too, but do it great on that first one, okay? And so I worked hard and I focused on my strengths. I talked to people. I got along with people. I always did that. I was polite. I smiled, right? And it's amazing how far being polite and smiling takes you, okay, in life, right? With anybody, a cab driver, say thank you, say please. They're going to be helpful to you, right? Just being nice. But now here I am, I'm trying to figure out, well, what am I going to do? So I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a corporate lawyer. And I wanted to be a corporate lawyer because I loved reading about Carl Icahn and T. Boone Pickens and going in and these corporate raiders. And this was exciting and this was great. So I'm sitting on the subway on my way to Weil Gotshal, and I'm reading the Wall Street Journal. And I see that Weil Gotshal is representing Westinghouse in the Westinghouse-CBS merger. So I get to the office, I call up the summer associate coordinator, and I say, I want to work on this. Can I work on this? She says, give me a second. She calls me back. She says, yes. Go up and see this partner, okay? I go to see the partner. I'm all excited, right? I mean, here I am, summer associate. This is great. I'm so pumped up for this. I sit down. I'm like, all right, so what are we going to do? And he goes, okay, so here's what we're going to do. He goes, the business people are at CBS now, and they're talking about the deal. Okay? We're going to go and we're going to look at precedent and pull out some reps and warranties that we're going to have to stick into the document, right? And we're going to do that. I said, what does that mean? He said, what do you mean? We got to do the documents, right? I said, well, why aren't we in the meeting with the business guys talking about all the deal stuff? And he's like, well, because that's the business guys. We're the lawyers. We're going to do the documents. And I was like, well, that's not fun, right? And now I want to say this, though. Don't get me wrong. Some people think it is fun, okay? And there's nothing wrong with that. Right? You need those people. At Kirkland & Ellis, we got a ton of those people who are so good with the documents, right? They know all the documents, and clients love that because they want to hire them over and over again because that's such an important role. But that's not what I wanted to do. I couldn't do that. I would have quit being a lawyer really fast, okay? So I left that. I was like, well, that's kind of a bummer because that's what I was going to do, and now what am I going to do? And then I went into the restructuring group, okay? And I didn't know nothing about bankruptcy and restructuring and what that meant. And I went in, and there's a guy, Harvey Miller, who ran Weil Gottschall's restructuring group and basically created modern-day bankruptcy, and bankruptcy as a business. And I went to a meeting with him, and when we walked through the door, everybody flocked to him. The CEO, the general counsel, all the creditors, everybody flocked to him and wanted to know what he thought. And the CEO was asking him not just for advice on legal issues, but on business issues. And I was like, okay, that's fun, right? Getting into the middle of it, right? Figuring out how to take all this chaos and bring it into order. I like that. I can do that, right? So through that process, through trying different things, I found the thing that made sense for me. And honestly, if I weren't a restructuring lawyer, I wouldn't be a lawyer. I couldn't do it this other. I couldn't be a litigator. I couldn't be a just pure transactional lawyer. It's not for me. It's not my personality. I found the one thing that worked for me in the law. Okay, so now two kind of lessons, right? And this goes also to this mindset thing I'm talking about. You can always grow, right? So now I'm going to be this lawyer. Well, what are two things that lawyers have to be able to do, right? And especially if you're ever going to go to court. You got to be able to speak in public, and you need to be able to write, okay? So let's talk about those things quickly. So Dean Macchiarola, who I mentioned before, he left the school the same year that I graduated from Cardozo. And when he was leaving, they had a farewell cocktail party for him. And he came to me and he said, hey, John, I'd really like it if you'd say a couple like quick remarks about me, right? You know, we've been here 3 years together. You mean a lot to me. It would be nice to hear from you. I said, great. So I worked on my remarks. It was like 4 lines. It was very short. But I really worked on it, thought about what I was going to say. And I was waiting now. We're at the cocktail party, and the first person gets up to speak. And I'm like 4th in line. And they get up. And as soon as they started speaking, I realized like my heart started beating pretty fast. I was like, okay, that's kind of weird, right? And then the second person got up. So I was getting closer, right? And now like I was having trouble breathing, and my throat was hurting, and I started to like feel lightheaded. And then the next person went up. And I was like, oh my God, like I don't even think I can walk, right? And then it was my turn. And I ran up to literally, right? And I don't know, Pam, if you remember this or you were there. I ran up, I put my thing down, I looked down, I just read it as fast as I could, and I left, okay? And I left, and I felt terrible. I felt terrible because I felt like I let Dean Mack down, right? Which he didn't think I did. And I felt terrible because I was like, you know, that was humiliating and embarrassing. Like, what does everybody must be thinking about me, right? And I had 2 choices at that moment. I could have said, I'm never going to speak in public again. It's just not happening. It is not for me. That does not work. Or I could get better at it. I could practice it. And I decided, I want to be able to get up and do this. I want to be able to speak. I want to be comfortable. I don't want to be nervous anymore. And so I started taking every opportunity I could take to just try to get up and talk. And I remember the first time I went to court, I got up and the same thing happened. My heart was beating and I was having trouble like breathing and swallowing, so I kept clearing my throat, and I made up and I was, I'm sick, which I wasn't, right? But I got through it, and every time I got through it, it got a little bit easier and a little bit better. And truthfully, if back then, so that was 1996, if you had told me that I could stand up here right now and walk around and talk like this, I would have said, you are crazy, right? I mean, today when Dean Diller introduced me, my heart wasn't beating fast. I wasn't nervous, right? And look, you guys could all be sitting here and think this is the worst thing in the world. And I guess where I've got is I don't care, okay? Like, I'm happy. I'm talking and it's all good, so, okay. The second thing is I had to learn how to write. And so when I got to Weil, I don't know if it's lucky or smart or what it was, but I was working with this one partner, and I handed in my first motion or whatever I wrote, and he rewrote the entire thing, right, in red ink. They used to do that. Now partners sometimes just go in and type it themselves, but he wrote it in red ink. And I got it back, and I had 2 choices. Choice 1 was to give it to my assistant and say, hey, can you make these changes and send it back to him. Choice 2 was I could actually type it in myself and think about what he did and what he was changing. And that's what I did. And everything I gave him, it had red ink that would come back. And I would look at it, and I would sit there, and I would type it all in, and I would think about his sentence structure and what he wrote and what he meant and how he did it and what he changed in my thing and why he changed it his way. And as it went on over a couple of months, the red ink started to be less and less and less, right? And then one day, he walked into my office. He said, you know, I love working with you because your writing's great, okay? And I sat there and I thought to myself, well, actually, it's exactly like yours, right? Because I've completely imitated you, everything. He used to use this phrase to start sentences off in that regard. I would use in that regard. I didn't even know why I was using in that regard, but I would use in that regard. And I just copied him. And then I got to the point where I was like, you know what? I'm a pretty good writer now. So now I can start doing it on my own, right? And I think one lesson is, if there's things that you're not good at and you want to get good at them, find somebody that you say, wow, I would like to be able to do it like that person, and start to imitate, right? Because once you imitate and you get good at it and it becomes easy for you, then you can sit back and say, okay, now I can do it my way, right? And you can personalize it. Okay, So we're getting close to the end. Be in the arena. So Theodore Roosevelt has a great speech about being in the arena, right? I only put up a piece of it, right? The credit belongs to the man who's in the arena, and I'm not looking at it, but bloodied and marred and all this stuff, right? And what it means is get in there, right? Like, don't be afraid to jump in. And when I think about my career, you know, I think that one of the things that I'm proud of is I didn't usually, I did jump in. So at Weil Gotshal, I remember if something came in that I saw was interesting, Summer Associate, I see that merger, I jumped in and said, hey, I want to work on this, right? When I was there as an associate, something came in that I liked, I would jump in, and I would jump in with both feet and grab it. At Weil Gotshal, after about 3 years, there was the whole dot-com boom, right, which before most of your times. But I decided, you know what, I don't really love being a lawyer, because for whatever reason at Weil Gotshal, I just started to get a little bit bored of it. And I decided to start my own company. And I jumped in, I raised a bunch of money, and I put together a board of some really prominent New York people. We built this software. We went out there, we did all this beta testing. The NASDAQ crashed. No one was giving money anymore. No one was buying the software. It was terrible. It was horrible. I was sitting there being like, oh my God, I'm a failure. And all of these friends and family gave me this money, right, that I'm now going to lose, okay? And what I learned from that was, number one, everybody except for one guy wasn't upset that I lost their money, okay? They knew, like, they were like, you worked as hard as you could, right? It wasn't your fault. There were circumstances, right, beyond your control. And even if there weren't, you tried, okay? And we knew it was speculative, and we were hoping we were going to make $1 billion, but it's not like we gave you our life savings. Like, you worked hard. That made me feel good. I was like, okay, good. So I don't feel so terrible about that because I was open and honest with them. But second, I learned so much. And what I looked at the end of the day was, I didn't look at it as I failed. I looked at it as I learned, right? And what did I learn from it? Now, one big lesson is that if you have a business and you want it to do well, you actually have to make money. That's a very important thing, okay? Second thing, though, is sometimes it's not going to work out the way you want it to work out. And when it doesn't, you got to take the lessons from that and take it on to the next step, because you're not defined by what happened today. You're going to be defined what's going to happen in the future, okay? Then I went to Kirkland & Ellis, right? Why did I do that? I didn't want to be a lawyer, but my wife got pregnant with our first child, and I had to grow up. I had to make money, and I didn't really know what else to do. But when I went there, the reason I went to Kirkland and not another firm was because Jamie Sprayregan, who runs our restructuring group, told me, Kirkland's different. It's entrepreneurial, right? We're growing. It's not hierarchical. All of these different things. And I didn't really believe him, to tell the truth. I thought he was just selling me on it. But it was true. And when I got to the firm, we had 4 people in our restructuring group in New York. We've got 40 now. So over the last 13 years, I've watched it grow, right? And working with all of these great people, right, I jumped in and didn't only become a really good lawyer, but I ran a business, and it's great, and it was exciting. And then I took other chances, right? I got an opportunity to go on to CNBC once, right, to do TV. And I thought to myself, like, why would I go on TV? Like, what do I know to talk about? But I did it, right? And you do it. And by the way, it's really cool. Like, they send a car for you. They take you to New Jersey. You sit in a room. They put some makeup on you. You go out. You're with, like, somebody that you've seen on TV before. You're sitting next to Steve Forbes. They ask you questions. You answer them. It's great. You tape it. You watch it with your kid. I mean, it's fun stuff, right? But I did it. And then I did that, and I started going on CNBC all the time and doing Bloomberg. And it was really fun. And I started writing all these, like, blogs for CNBC and op-ed pieces and stuff, right? And I took chances. And I was writing on things that you could look at and be like, what's John Henes writing about, like, you know, global debt issues, right? What does he know? He's a bankruptcy lawyer. Well, I don't know what I know, but I kind of feel confident enough that I'm smart enough to write something intelligent. So you do it. You take chances. And then do good. And this is the most important thing of everything. Do good, right? Find some charity. Find somebody less fortunate than you and help them, okay? And to me, the most rewarding things that I've done are those things, okay? And those aren't all of the things, but, like, I'm so involved in different charities, and it's because it feels good to give back, and it's the right thing to do. And the truth is, in some ways, it's selfish. You get, oh, sorry, you can't hold on to this, but you get things back from it, right? It can help you in business. It can help you in your life, but you're doing something good. And I just want to give one example of something, because things happen in life, and even when you don't know you're doing them, okay? So, and Melissa knows this person. So at Kirkland, there's a guy who's in our records department. His name's Ramiro. Ramiro's from Honduras, okay? And Ramiro is one of these just remarkable guys. Like, he, in fact, and not kidding, he jumped on the subway tracks and saved somebody, right? Like, train was coming, he jumped on, he grabbed the guy, he pulled him up. There was a whole news thing about him. This guy's like an amazing guy, and he's the kind of guy that just you gravitate to. And a few years ago, he came by, it was right around the holidays, And he said, for Christmas, I'm going down to Honduras. And he said, John, I do this every year. It's great. I go down, and I go to a poor village. And what I do is, with a bunch of friends, I give out Barbie dolls and food and other things to the kids. We bring somebody who dresses up like Santa Claus. The kids love it. It's great. And I'm thinking to myself, here's a guy who literally makes, he's hand to mouth on what he makes in New York City, and he's flying down to Honduras to go do something so good for these people. So I got up and I had to go to a meeting, and I wrote a $500 check. I gave it to my assistant. I said, make sure Ramiro gets it. Tell him to go buy some other stuff with it. Now, what I didn't know is how far $500 goes in Honduras. So when he came back, he was like, hey, John, thank you so much for that. He said, and by the way, you are now a celebrity in Honduras. I said, what does that mean? He said, you've been on TV, your name's everywhere. He said, look what I brought you. It's a plaque from the Honduras Congress thanking you for what you did. I was like, oh, okay, that's great. So anyway, it's actually true, but not the celebrity part, the plaque part. But the next year, he said, I'm doing something different this year. I'm going into a poor area again, and what we're going to do is we're going to go fix up a school, okay? Because the schools down there, they're dilapidated. There's no desks. There's no chairs. The bathrooms are terrible. There's no privacy, so a lot of the girls don't go to school because if they do go to school, it's not good for, in a lot of ways, hygiene and also dangerous. So we're going to go and we're going to fix up a school, okay? And he told me the day he's leaving, which is what he used to do, and I always said, can you give me some lead time so we can help on this stuff? So I ran around and we collected $3 grand, right? And we gave it to him. And he went down and he fixed up this school, right? And they did a video of it with all the kids helping and everything else, but they completely fixed it up. And he came to me a few months later, he said, just want to let you know, there's been not one dropout in the entire school because now you have this community that has so much pride in it. So I said to him, I was like, you know what, Ramiro, first of all, everybody you talk to wants to help you because you're so earnest, you're so honest, and you're doing such amazing things. I was like, why don't you turn this into a charity, right? We're Kirkland. We'll do that. We'll do all the work for you. We'll turn you into a 501c3 so people can give it on it, tax deduction. We'll help you put together a board. And in fact, I'm on the board of this charity, and so is the guy Shai Weissman, who's a Cardozo grad and is on the board of trustees of the school. And now we're turning it into a charity, right? And for $15,000, you can go down and completely rebuild the school. You can give the kids soccer balls and their uniforms for going to school and new desks and everything else. And I'm sorry for the long story, but I think it's important because it's this type of thing. Don't miss the signs. Don't miss watching what people are doing, especially people who really are doing good. And when you can help, jump in and help because it's important and it's just good for yourself and the world. Okay. All right, now we're really getting to the end. So now I'm just going to kind of this is just in summary. Things that I've kind of learned, and you can tell I like lyrics. I can't help it. Boston, Don't Look Back. It's a great song, but it's true, right? I guess you should look back a little bit because you want to learn and you want to remember things and you want to use them in your everyday life, but don't look back with any regret because what you did, you did. You can't change that. All you can change is what you're doing today and what you're going to do tomorrow, right? So take the lessons from yesterday, but focus on today. Focus on what you're doing. When you leave here right now and you go to whatever, a class or anything else, focus on that. Don't worry about, I got a C- on my civil procedure midterm because you got a C- on your civil procedure midterm, right? Why'd you get it? Learn from that and then go get your A, okay? So don't look back. Also, there's always time. And what I mean by that is, I think, and I see myself doing this too, especially as I get older, you start saying, some of the dreams I had, some of the things I wanted to do, I can't do. But that's not true. You can always do it, right? So if you had your heart set on coming to law school, doing great, getting a job at a big firm, but you didn't get that, one, maybe that's good. Maybe it wasn't the right thing because you're going to be on a different track that's going to get you to a happier and a better place. Or maybe you still want that and you can do it. But you never run out of time. Just keep growing and keep moving forward. I said it's not about what's easy, it's about doing what's hard. And that goes, again, to this mindset thing that I'm all focused on, right? Because the things that you're good at, you should do those things, obviously. But if they're easy for you, they're easy for you. At some point, though, you're going to hit something that's hard. And if you're not used to doing something that's hard, right, you may give up, right? And you don't want to give up. It's right? For me, public speaking. I mean, I wasn't kidding about that story. I literally didn't think I could make it up to that podium, right? And now I can stand up here and talk, right? That took really hard work, right? And I could have easily given up and not had an opportunity to do something that I actually now really enjoy doing. So focus on the things that are hard and work on them. You can do them. There's no question about it. It just takes hard work. And follow your passion, right? And I really think that that's critical. Like, don't let anybody else tell you what you should do or what you would be good at or anything else. I mean, you can listen to that, and people sometimes have good insights, but what do you want? What do you want to do, okay? Like, you can see for me, like, this, like that Honduras thing, or Michael Lynch Foundation, which is a 9/11 charity. Like, I care about that stuff. It matters to me. Like, you know, I'll stay up at night thinking about that because I am passionate about it, right? And follow your passion, because you'll end up being able to, one, do great things, but you'll also be happy doing them. And then the last thing is, the effort is worth it, okay? Working hard, right, and failing, which really I think is learning, and working harder and focusing and putting the effort in, at the end of the day, it pays off. And it not only pays off, but it feels good, okay? And that's important. You want to feel good in life. So I think that's all I have, unless anybody has any questions or thoughts or comments. Thank you. And you can do questions, comments, thoughts, or critiques. I will be being honest that last year when I did this talk, you know, I got a lot of, oh, that was great. And, you know, external validation's a great thing, right? Like working hard at something and then getting people to tell you you're good, that's great. But you don't necessarily learn from that. It's just like a good feeling. But I asked for constructive feedback, not from people sitting there like, you suck, and throwing things out there, but like, and people gave it to me, and it's good. You learn from that. Like, so anything you guys want to ask now, you can, you don't have to. Yes?
Just in general, just because I watched your last point and it was pretty interesting. In terms of the, you know, charity work that you listed, are there a lot that the firm itself are also involved in, apart from the one? Yeah,
the way Kirkland works is with charities is partners can kind of do whatever they want, and we have a foundation at the firm that will support partners in that effort, so long as the partners are actually putting their money where their mouth is, right? But so the firm does, it does want people to get involved with pro bono and with charity and all of that, but it's really up to the individuals to do different things. And if you don't have questions, that's totally fine. I won't be insulted in any way. Anybody else? Are we good? All right, thank you guys very much.
Thank you, John. That was really fantastic, and I always learn when I listen to you.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
I think there are lessons in that talk for all of us, and thank you for all that you do for our students and for our school.
You too. Thank you.
And I have to say, one consequence, I'm afraid, of this talk is that you've set the bar pretty high for the next speaker, and I just want to point that out to you, that the next speaker is Michael Reinert, who will be here on, I think, the 17th is the date, who has a long history in the entertainment business. And so
I think he spoke when I was in law school.
So I would invite you to that, and thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic. And
thank you.
Thank you, Pam, for coming as well.